All right, we're recording. Cool. All right, I think I'll kind of go ahead and get started. So we're running a little late. Apologies for that. Just some kind of back-to-back meetings and technical difficulties combined. But hello, everyone. Welcome to the March edition of the Advocacy in Action webinar. For those of you who have not met me, my name is Sam Miller. I'm AOPA's State and Federal Advocacy Manager. And today I'm joined by our Director of Health Policy and Advocacy, Joe McTurnan.
Hey guys, how's everyone doing today? Nice to see y'all or hear you all.
So the 118th Congress is now underway. It's been for a few months now. And so we here at AOPA, we've been hard at work developing the newest version of the Medicare Orthotics and Prosthetics Patient-Centered Care Act. And with the policy forum only a few months away, Joe and I wanted to take some time to give you all an update on where we're at with the new bill and address any questions you might have as well about kind of our plans for this Congress. And feel free to jump in with any questions you have. We're just kind of be talking it out and hoping that you learn something new about our plans for this year. So Joe, I wanted to kind of start off and ask you how the latest version of this bill is different from the one that we were working on in the previous Congress for the last couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. So the previous version of the bill had four main provisions, and we're actually only advancing two of those in the new version of the bill, and I'll cover all those in just a minute. But we're adding in a third provision that's new that I think is going to be valuable to AOPA members, and if we can get it through and across the finish line, I think it's going to provide real value to the membership in general, and frankly the profession as a whole. So the two provisions that we are moving forward with that are carryovers from the version of the bill that went pretty far, frankly, in the 117th Congress is the provision that would extend the exemption from competitive bidding from physicians and therapists to include both certified prosthetists and certified orthotists as well. So this is something that we didn't have a whole lot of opposition from in the last Congress, and it really has very little impact on budget for the federal government, because the exemption would really only be for orthotists and prosthetists who are providing care to their own patients and providing off-the-shelf orthoses and prostheses to their own patients. It would not require them to compete and receive competitive bid contracts. However, they would still have to accept the negotiated rates that were established through the competitive bidding program, the same as physicians do right now, the same as therapists do right now. Nobody's getting a free pass that says you get paid more than anybody else as part of this exemption. The exemption is truly about making sure patients have access to care, and that's the goal. That's why this is such a really valuable patient-centric provision. The big example that we use is that right now under competitive bidding, if a patient comes in that is a amputee and they come in for prosthetic care, but they also have, say they have an ACL injury, or they have a instability of the knee, or they have drop foot on their sound side, and they don't need an advanced orthosis. They simply need a general basic off-the-shelf orthosis to be able to treat that sound side condition. Right now, unless you have a competitive bidding contract award, you can't provide that off-the-shelf brace. They have to go somewhere else, and that's frankly kind of ridiculous. So that's one provision that's carrying over. The second provision that we are carrying over from the last Congress deals with the potential or the prohibition on drop shipping of custom fitted and custom fabricated orthoses. So this was a problem that came about, was identified through the federal operation that was known as Operation Brace Yourself, where folks were having custom fitted and custom fabricated, in some cases, braces dropped off at their doorstep by their postal delivery or by UPS or by FedEx. And sometimes it was 4 or 5 braces where they were just caught up in a TV ad or a call center. And there was no real medical necessity. This was a pure fraud and abuse situation. So We're advancing that prohibition. We are not trying to extend that to include off-the-shelf orthoses. There's just no way that we would be able to do that. And frankly, an off-the-shelf orthosis, by its nature, doesn't require any clinical expertise to fit. So we don't want to inhibit our AOPA members from being able to provide off-the-shelf orthoses through drop shipping if it's a truly legitimate way to do it. So we're advancing that, but we are limiting that, and that's what we did in the last version of this bill. We're proposing to limit that to only custom fit and custom fabricated orthoses. So that says, okay, well, what are the other two provisions that we are not moving forward in this bill? And it doesn't mean that they are not priorities for AOPA, because they certainly are. We just feel that there might be other ways to advance the advocacy on these things, and that is the redefinition of the term off the shelf to only mean that those modifications that can only be made by the patient and not extended to either the caregiver or the practitioner. That doesn't mean that that's not still a priority for us. It certainly is, and we feel that CMS and the DME Max have absolutely overextended what they are considering off-the-shelf orthoses for purposes of inclusion in competitive bidding, to the detriment of the patient population. But the fact is that the cost associated with this kind of provision really made it a non-starter in the last Congress. It was one of our major hurdles. So we're trying to move forward what we can move forward legislatively, and then continue to work on some of these other issues through regulatory channels. So the other provision that we are looking to not forget about, but we're not going to include in the current bill. And I'm drawing a complete blank. I'm so sorry. Let me think about this for a second.
It's the separation.
That's right. Thank you, Sam. I get wrapped up in this stuff, guys, and I talk about it so much that sometimes it just goes right out of my head. So yeah, this would be the provision that would truly separate orthotics and prosthetics from other types of DME. So we all know we get caught up in the DMEPOS acronym, which is Durable Medical Equipment Orthotics Prosthetic Supplies, and that we had pursued for many years a potential opportunity to further delineate legislatively the difference. What we found is that for reasons that we still don't understand and that we don't necessarily agree with, we got a lot of pushback from other provider groups, the therapists especially, that felt that if we were to somehow carve out orthotics and prosthetics and further delineate them from other types of durable medical equipment, that somehow this was going to hinder the ability of therapists to provide orthoses that were within their scope of practice. And that was never our goal. It was never our intent. We didn't feel that the current statute or our proposed provision did that. But at the same time, we realized that without support from some of those larger groups and some of our allied health partners, it can cause serious problems in getting this across the finish line. And if we could get their support, that it would have the opposite effect and really help us. So we are very confident that there actually is current statutory separation of DME from O&P. O&P is addressed in a completely separate subsection of the Social Security Act. So we feel that we can pursue that through some regulatory channels as well. We have started talking to the therapists about this from the beginning, and they are fully on board with this, and we expect their full support on this new version of the bill. So those are the two provisions that we're kind of not advancing in this Congress. The new provision that we're adding in, which we think is going to have real value to AOPA members in the profession as a whole, is a provision that would extend the ability to replace orthotics or orthoses without regard to useful lifetime restrictions that currently exists and has existed legislatively since the year 2000 with the passage of BIPA that extends that for prosthetics. So right now, there is no reasonable useful lifetime for prostheses. It's all tied to medical necessity. And so we are proposing a provision that would extend that to include not off the shelf, but would include custom fitted and custom fabricated orthoses as well. Again, off the shelf, the price tag is essentially too high to try and include that, and there's too much fraud and abuse concern to try and include off the shelf orthoses as well. Doesn't mean that this provision wouldn't allow a provider to provide a custom fitted or fabricated orthosis after an off the shelf orthosis was provided if it didn't meet the patient's needs, or it broke or wore out, etc. So that's something that it's going to be a heavy lift. And one of the reasons why we are pushing the drop shipping prohibition in the next Congress is partially because of the potential to offset any potential cost of eliminating useful lifetime. But so those are the three provisions that we have moving forward. So that was kind of a long-winded answer. Sorry, Sam.
No, I appreciate the detail, and I think it really underscores the patient-centric aspect of this bill, as the name implies. And speaking of kind of the cost of this bill, I wanted to kind of ask about how we plan on moving this bill, like what our strategy is kind of starting to take shape moving forward.
So can you repeat that? I'm sorry, I was reading the chat. Can you just quickly repeat that question? I apologize.
Yeah, no, how kind of, speaking of the costs and how we're doing these offsets, how does that kind of play into our strategy moving forward?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that really kind of prevented this bill from getting across the finish line in the 117th is that we essentially had the Congressional Budget Office come in at the last minute and say, well, we really don't have a way to quantify what the potential cost of some of these provisions are going to be. So we have a lot of Medicare claims data that we think is going to be valuable in trying to answer some of those questions with a little bit more time to do so. So, one of the obvious questions is going to be, well, if we change the reasonable useful lifetime rules, or we don't restrict orthoses to those rules, is that going to create a tremendous amount of cost to the Medicare system, and will that be budget impossible? And so one of the nice things that we have is we have experience. We have a similar legislation from 2000 that made this change prosthetically. So we have claims data, and we're analyzing that data right now. That will hopefully show that there was not a big utilization uptick in prosthetic claims during that time, and that wouldn't be expected for orthoses. So we're going to try and work the data and try and address some of those questions that were roadblocks during the last Congress, and try and get proactive answers on those, so that when we're ready to talk to CBO, we're ready to have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think something that we were kind of trying to do with the last Congress was get that CBO score and the technical assistance kind of right before the finish line almost. And I think getting that kind of earlier in the process is going to be really helpful. I'm just seeing what Ralph, that's really interesting. Redefining O&P as part of the major medical category.
Yeah, and I mean, guys, there are so many ways to try and do this through regulatory channels that we don't necessarily need a legislative separation. The legislative separation, the statutory separation is actually already there. So we don't need and Congress is frankly very hesitant to pass bills that the only thing they do is require the existing law to be enforced. They don't like to do that. They don't like to pass laws that affect already in place laws. So that's a great suggestion, Ralph, and maybe a way to tackle this from a regulatory or sub-regulatory approach. Thanks.
Yeah, and I really like the kind of the argument of O&P being that worn kind of an extension of somebody's body rather than something that is in the corner that you can pick up and anyone can use, like in other kind of DME examples. So that's really interesting. I think now that it's a new Congress, there have been, the midterms just happened. There's new members of Congress. I think there are about 75 new across the House and the Senate. So who are we kind of hoping to serve as champions for this bill?
Yeah, so well, the good news is there was a lot of change in Congress, but the good news there is that there wasn't a lot of change that impacted our previous champions. We have a lot of support from those folks, and there's no reason to expect that support will change. We've already been in contact with several of our past champions. The only one that left was Representative Butterfield, who left Congress. Our main champions from the last Congress will most likely be the folks that we pursue to take the lead on this. On the Senate side, we had Senator Warner and Senator Daines were our two main champions on the Senate side, with obviously Senator Duckworth has been very supportive of stuff we've done in the past, so we would expect that we would get her support as well, and others that we've had support from the past. But Daines and Warner, Daines is Republican, Warner's Democrat. We want to get as much support, bipartisan support on this as possible. And then on the House side, we've worked with both Thompsons, Representative GT out of Pennsylvania and Mike Thompson out of California, have both been very supportive in the past and could be potential champions going forward. Representative Guthrie out of Kentucky is definitely going to most likely be one of our main champions in the House as well. So we have some folks lined up that we've worked with before that we think will be very, very supportive and very willing to take this on again. And so we're already working with those offices. So we're working to try and get some perhaps one of the either Senator Daines or perhaps Representative Guthrie maybe to join us at the policy forum in May. Not set in stone just yet, but those are the most likely candidates to join us for a fundraising event and a possible address to the attendees at the policy forum in May. So the goal obviously is to get this introduced in time for policy forum. It's not urgent, it's not mandatory, but it's something that we absolutely would like to have introduced at that point, so we have an actual bill number to take up to the Hill.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then I think that something that we've also learned that's really interesting, I don't think this congressman would serve as a champion necessarily, but Larry Bouchon, who is from Indiana's 8th district, I believe it's kind of southwest Indiana. His mother was she received an off-the-shelf orthoses without through like a drop shipping fraudulent scheme. And he had mentioned that to one of the members of our lobbying team. And so you can really see how this impacts members of Congress directly, and how that kind of provides us with an opportunity to say, hey, here's a piece of legislation that's going to help address these issues and help people like your mother not be a victim of these fraudulent activities.
Yeah.
So I think something that I would want to know, I know that a lot of times these bills every Congress, they're slightly the same, but they're also slightly different. And what's kind of the idea of how this bill will have a better chance of passing than previous versions? I know we've kind of spoken about that a little bit throughout this discussion, but
so it's an interesting balance, because you want to take advantage of name recognition and familiarity, but at the same time you don't want to necessarily just reintroduce the same bill that didn't pass the last time with no strategy to get it passed and get it further advanced this time. It's important to remember that the likelihood of a bill getting passed on its first introduction is very, very small. Very few bills do it. Very few bills are successful in getting through the gauntlet that is Congress on the first go round. They do take some time, and you learn a little bit of a lesson every time you go through the process. So with that in mind, we are planning to keep the name of the bill the same. It'll obviously get new bill numbers because it's a new Congress, and the bill numbers will be assigned based on when in the chronological order they're introduced. But we are expecting both a Senate bill and a House bill, companion bills as they would be called. But we are planning to keep the orthotics and prosthetics, the Medicare O&P Patient-Centered Care Act moniker and name. As far as what did we learn from the last Congress, I think a couple things that we've learned that will help us be successful in this Congress is that we need to make sure that all of our all of our allied health partners are on board from the beginning. So we've already had really good productive conversations with therapy groups. We've had good productive conversations with my colleagues at the APMA, the American Podiatric Medical Association. We're working with all of those other groups to try and build some consensus support that will not only help to get support on this bill, but actually to have active and proactive support from their membership as well. So if we can get that, that's going to be helpful. Obviously, we're going to need to stay ahead of the CBO question because that made it very easy to just push this aside and essentially let the previous Congress expire without action on this bill. So that's another thing that we're going to be proactive about to try and make sure that those questions are answered in a timely way and that they don't come up right at the end. And then obviously this is a bill that will almost certainly not be a standalone. So we're going to try and find a vehicle for this early rather than late in the last Congress, and frankly in most Congresses it's everything gets attached at the end to what they call an omnibus style bill, and there's a lot of folks trying to get their bills in at the last minute. We were just one of the groups standing in line, and frankly not a whole lot got attached. So some of it's out of our control, some of it is all going to be on political climate. We're not in a very cooperative congressional environment right now, as we all know. So not a lot is moving, but if we get the right environment, we get the right vehicle to get this attached to, we can certainly do the work on our end to give it every chance we can to get it through. So
definitely. And then I think something that AOPA members can do to help us in this effort is really come to the policy forum. It's really important to speak to legislators about these issues one-on-one and how they impact your patients, your practice, your business, and kind of the community of people living with limb loss, limb difference, and mobility impairments as a whole. And the policy forum, it's going to be on May 10th and 11th. We've got the dates locked in, and it'll be at the Marriott Capitol Hill, if I'm not mistaken. So it's very close to the Capitol complex. So it'll be really nice to be able to meet legislators, and I'll be assisting with kind of setting up meetings and just being able to tell your story and getting this bill passed.
Yeah, we can spend a lot of time meeting with legislators, and we're just lobbyists like the next guy. But technically I'm not a registered lobbyist, but I'm using that term as the royal we there. But when you're meeting with your legislator in their office and you are a constituent of them, and you're telling them how it's impacting folks in their district, especially patients, it sends a great message and you get their attention.
Absolutely. Well, now that we've kind of come to the end of the webinar, I wanted to announce this month's Advocate of the Month. This month, it is Ariadne Hansen. Congratulations. I wanted to present you with this award for your interest in signing up for the AOPA co-op. I'm going to shamelessly plug the co-op. I update that almost every day with information about legislative regulatory developments from states across the country. So if there's any states that you're interested in, or if it's just wanting to know more about the government and the O&P field in the state that you're in, then please let me know and I can get you signed up so you can get those updates daily, weekly, however you prefer. So
sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I'll be sending you a $15 Starbucks gift card in honor of your selection. So hopefully you can enjoy a couple cups of coffee on us. So.
Oh, awesome! Thank you.
Yep. Sam, you have her email, right?
Yep. Yeah, I'll be in touch.
Yep.
Absolutely.
We'll get that out to you shortly. So thank you for all you do, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
And thank you everybody for attending this month's webinar. I'm excited for the policy forum in May, excited to get this bill going and make sure it passes in this Congress. So I hope everyone has a great day, has a great month and week, and I'll see you soon, most likely.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for listening to us today.
Thanks, everyone.